The interesting thing about the Beaker folk was that they had studied astronomy and mathematics and that sort of thing. And the mathematics and, let's say, the finer things in life the Celts were interested in because it wasn't to do with fighting. All right? So these other people who had been before them had made Newgrange and done all these things. And the Celts regarded them as some sort of magicians. And this is where the little people came from. They drove these people. They were their god was called Dana, and the Dedanans, right. the people of the Danas. And they went off into the forest, eventually, of course, died out. But the thing of leprechauns and little people and everything comes from that. It's because they were like the Indians that went off into the forest when the white men came and used to come down at night to steal the cows and steal the milk and steal the horses. It's exactly the same thing. Right. It's been repeated everywhere, in every colonial. Well, there was two lots of Celts. There was the Goidelic Celts, Goidelic, who spoke a Celtic language. And then following on a few hundred years later were the Brehonic Celts, or the British Celts. And you'll have heard of the Brehon Law and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Well, the word Britain comes from that, of course. They were the Brehonic Celts, who now still exist in Wales, all right? And they speak the Brehonic language. They spoke a Celtic language which had basic words the same as in Goidelic, like the word for mountains and rivers and that sort of thing. Like the word Avon, the river Avon. Here it's an Awan for a river, you see. Awan Moor is a big river. Bont, their word for a bridge. So it's a Taliabont and all this sort of thing. But they had, the Brehonic Celts spoke slightly different, except in one respect. Their grammar uses the same rules as Gaelic or Goidelic. So this thing of, like, say you had the men's room. It's not Siomra na Fear, but Siomra na Var. So the F is stuck with a H and it's pronounced as a V. Sleeve na Marn. That's it should really be Sleeve na Barn, the mountain of the woman. But in that, I think it's called I forget what its name now, but in the dative case or ablative, something like that, when it's something is of, the sound changes. So instead of the board of the horses, board na couple, it's board na gopple. So the G eclipses the C. It's a genitive case. Just remember, untisl genitach. It's one of the few things I learnt when I went to do Irish lessons. Untisl genitach, and you can only learn it not from books, but from listening to it and watching a TG4 and seeing the English underneath and you hear them talking it. That's the best thing that ever happened for the Irish language. Michael D. Higgins was the man responsible for that. Instead of it being screwed down somebody's throat with a big stick and a whack, they make it an interesting programme. So anyway, the two different Celts, so your Goidelic ones in Ireland and the Brehonic ones in Wales and England. And they would have done a lot of trading between each other. This is why they're now going to excavate Drumonach. Drumonach was a promontory fort.
Right.
The county council have bought the site. I think it's 35 acres. And in the middle of it is a very interesting thing. It's a Martello Tower, perfect condition. So they'll obviously make that a museum, if they've any sense. If they haven't, they'll bulldoze it to use the bricks for the roads or something. I mean, it's worse happened. But they're going to excavate the whole of Drumonach, because Drumonach, from the air, with certain cameras and stuff. They can see little squares and
Right.
round circles. That's right, yeah.
It seems as if they lost a lot of their ground to erosion, did they?
Oh, yeah, there's a fair amount.
Yeah.
But they've got something fairly unique there. It's not unique, but it's very, very rare. And it's folded rocks
It's strata.
that go back on themselves. And when you look at it and you think, how can you bend a solid, cold rock? You know, like a piece of plasticine. Now, possibly, I presume, there was some sort of volcanic and stuff which melted it, which made it malleable so it would move.
Yeah.
But that's Lambay's covered in all that stuff. Now there's
and then the Celtics came. They didn't do much. They weren't. I'm sure they farmed. They obviously farmed. Did they do all that? I'm interested more to do with the Lambay and the activities that went on there, and the next stage that.
The next stage in Lambay would have been 795 AD. The place had already become Christianized, and there was a monastery there, and it would have been not before April, because you don't go rowing a boat out in the middle of the winter. But the Vikings had a base in the Isle of Man. That was the Viking headquarters, and in the springtime they used to set out raiding parties, and they sent one to Lambay, and killed the monks and took all the gold stuff and all that.
And then roughly the period.
The people in Rush, what few there were, moved off to Lusk and built the round tower. That was the first ever round tower. Right. And from the top, if you go up there now, you can see the sea. And that was to watch for the Viking ships.
And the period?
The period, that was we'll call the 9th century, from 795 on until about the year 1000. It was backwards and forwards with the Vikings until there were two lots of Vikings. The ones that came here were the Norsemen. So the Norsemen, they were from Norway.
Norse.
Then the Danes, who tended to have people with dark hair as well, they settled in Dublin.
Right.
And also in Baldoyle. That's the town of the dark foreigners.
Right.
Ballydougal.
Very good.
Like this here is Finnegal. And well, they became Christianised as well. But there were no towns in Ireland before the Vikings came. None at all. There wasn't a Dublin to come in and sack or anything. There was a river there, and they founded a little town where Woodkey is, or was. It's now the civic offices, thanks to the Philistines and the Dublin Council. They settled there, and they settled there because there was a wide part of the river which made like a big puddle, and the river running into it they called the Poddle. And it's where the Poddle runs in to the Liffey, where the original city of Dublin was built, and it's on Capel Street Bridge. Or it's either Capel or Church Street. I think it's Capel Street. You go over that bridge and you'll see this like sort of sewer outlet, a great big sort of semicircle, water coming out. That's the River Poddle coming out. And the River Poddle was used as a moat for Dublin Castle. And if you go into Birmingham Tower in Dublin Castle, go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see the water there. And it's fascinating. And the little steps where people got off boats and came up into the tower.
Yes.
And
the remains of a bridge, you can see.
That's right, that's it. They've got all of that.
Amazing.
It's amazing what's underneath Dublin.
Yeah. An interesting time.
And of course, Dublin means Black Pool,
yes,
which is the big pool that where they built the thing.
Yeah.
You know.
On Lambay, then the next thing that happened then, life went on with the Celts, the Celtic people there. What was the next upheaval? What was the other landmark time?
The other landmark time was in 1691, I think. Yeah, after the Battle of Aughrim, and the like half of the Irish ended up in Limerick, besieged by the Williamites. They were led by your man riding around on a horse, you know. No, James.
He
James
fled.
buggered off long
He did,
before
yeah.
that.
All right, okay.
He on the 12th of July,
Yeah.
that's when he spurred his horse
Yeah.
and got a boat from Dublin for France.
Yeah.
They used to say that
He won the
all they had
race.
to do was to swap commanders, and the others the Jacobites would have won the it's fascinating, the Battle of the Boyne.